another pivot. I realized for myself that I can't convince people to change. It sounds so weird, but I can tell you in a lot of organizations, it's really contradictory what they tell their people to do and what they actually reward.
Welcome to the Culture Edge podcast. Are you an entrepreneur or a change maker who's frustrated with the pace of change inside your organization? Well, this show will, I hope, offer you valuable practical advice as you navigate your career. And our guests will also help you answer the question, am I better matched to the corporate world or to the startup world? My name is Stephen Parkins, and I'm determined to help people like you and your business build a strong, healthy culture of innovation. We're joined today by Dr Aurelia Engelsberger. Aurelia is CEO and founder of OMIND, a consulting company as well as a software platform. Having previously worked at large organizations in banking, fashion, the auto industry, and academia, Aurelia helps companies create an open innovation mindset. Well, hello, Aurelia. Welcome to the Culture Edge podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. It's great that you take the time to take part in this podcast. And one of the reasons why I launched this podcast is I'm passionate about the topic of innovation culture and corporate culture in general and what drives it. And one of the things that really bothers me is the fact that it's often treated as a very fuzzy matter, something that's not at all tangible. You really can't get your hands on it. But I fundamentally disagree with that notion. And I've got a suspicion that you're more aligned with my perspective. So I'm very, very curious to get your opinion on that and how you've seen this play out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you, but I can totally understand the people who are saying that because, I mean, obviously, if you look at the word innovation and you ask people how they define innovation, you ask 10 people, you get 10 different definitions.
Or even 11 different definitions.
Or even 11. Yeah. Same with mindset. I mean, what is a mindset? You know, everyone thinks differently about it. And then if you put these two words together, obviously, it can only be very, very fuzzy and intangible. But it was also something that was driving me personally to get a better understanding of what actually is this innovation mindset and how to measure it. And that's why I was doing my PhD on the intersection of psychology and innovation. And I was really driving into that. And I'm happy to tell you more about it.
Great. Yes, please do. And not to go into too much depth about your PhD, but maybe you could just tell us the highlights of it and how that relates to your work today.
I was hoping to go into very much detail of my research, but no worries. Look, I mean, I used to work in industry, and I was really accompanying a lot of transformation processes, a lot of change processes from an HR and from an organizational perspective. And what I've experienced is that most of the transformations fail due to the people and not the technology. And this is where the innovation mindset comes in, right? It's really about readiness for change. It's about readiness for innovation. And it's about decreasing psychological barriers and fears. Because if people talk about resistance, I would rather talk about fears and uncertainties, because change brings so much uncertainties with it. And I think it's important to understand that in close detail.
Yeah, maybe even a step back before understanding the resistance to change, maybe a really obvious question, but why is change and transformation important for organizations that are already profitable, already doing well? Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a good question. And a lot of companies actually ask me that back, like, why should we change? You know, it's working so well. But I mean, just looking at digital transformation, for example, even if you're a profitable company, you cannot say, oh, we're not going to take part in this. You know, we're just going to skip digitalization. That's not working. And I mean, in the end, it's the people who need to use digital tools, who need to adapt to that. And I can give you one example from one of our clients in the fashion industry. You know, fashion is very emotional, and the designers, they used to touch and feel their materials. And now suddenly they need to sit on a computer and use 3D rendering programs, and they don't feel the difference between leather and other materials anymore. And that's a big mindset shift, right? And I think understanding that as a company that you need to support your people in that change process is really important, because which company can survive without digitalization? If I may ask you that back.
Well, yes, that's right. Well, I think quite a few companies would claim that they're doing quite well in the physical world, but I'm doubtful that their customers see it the same way. Put it like that. So you gave us a good example from the corporate world. That was a large company, I take it, that you were describing. How do you see it in the startup world? Is it necessarily the case that change and transformation is automatically a more natural thing in the startup world? Because, I mean, why would you create a startup if not to change something about the world? So how do you see it in the startup world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the startup world, you have this great starting point that when you start off a company, there is nothing established yet, right? There are not old habits or old way of thinking. So you start from scratch and you're working very agile from the beginning. So you can really shape it in a way that everyone is open for change, and that it's just the new DNA that you always adapt and change, right? I mean, also our startup, we are existing for 1 year now, and I think we've done a lot of changes and pivots already. And that's just the way it works, right? But I think big companies, they're just so used to the way they've been doing it over the last couple of years. And as you said, if they've been successful, they didn't change that much. And now suddenly, through external factors like digitalization or any other changes in the environment, now they need to do things differently. They're just not so used to it.
You mentioned then about your own startup making changes and pivots. Could you talk us through a few of those? I mean, what was your original plan, and then what happened to make you change course?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, after my PhD, after I knew what the drivers for innovation are on the individual level, I was starting with consulting, and I was doing some projects to advise the C-level in companies on how to build such an innovation mindset, how to measure it, how to capture it, and how to systematically develop it. And I was doing before and after analysis, which is quite nice, because then you finally can show that there's a return on invest when investing in people. And then that was the first pivot from my own business model. I realized I don't want to exchange my time versus money, so I need to have a scalable business model. And also, a lot of companies have this problem. So, I can't clone myself. So I need to find a scalable way to offer this solution and this measurable approach to big companies. And that's then how I came to the conclusion to build a startup together with other founders, which are software developers or UX designers, to really digitalize my research results and provide it to big companies as a scalable solution. And we started off more from an open innovation direction, so more supporting organizations to collaborate across different external stakeholders like suppliers, partners, customers, even competitors. But then also I realized, coming back from Australia to Germany, that the German market is not as open for external collaboration yet. There's still a lot of fears involved. And then we realized in Germany, at least at the moment, it's really important first to establish such an open mindset within the organization, so that different departments and subsidiaries are actually working together, right?
No, that's right. And that mindset is not something that you change overnight. And I've tried to do that myself at several organizations and had my share of successes and failures in that. How's it been for you? And what has worked for you and what has not worked for you in trying to convince people to change? Let's say, especially in Germany, since that's the market that you know well.
That was a very good question. Maybe that was another pivot. I realized for myself that I can't convince people to change. So we're actually working with companies who already understood that the old ways are not working in the future anymore, and that they are looking for new ways of empowering their people and really building another culture and way of working because they realize the old style is just not working in the new world anymore. But yeah, people, or let's say CEOs who did not understand that yet, it's really hard to change the company because you really need to buy in from the C-level to really change the culture, right? You can't just do that bottom up. So I think that was also my personal learning, to work with the people who are brave enough to change, who are ready and willing to start something new.
Yeah, who've already made that mental step towards wanting to change and transform themselves. Yeah. So let's see if we can summarize this a little bit then in terms of the challenge that we see. Clearly, we're talking about a challenge of openness and a willingness to change and transform. What do you think the root difficulty is? Is it a difficulty of a problem of incentives, of people not driven in the right way? Is it a problem of personality? What do you think? What is the root challenge here that we're facing?
Yeah, what I found in my research is that it's definitely not a personality. So you can't say, oh, I'm just not that way, you know? It's not that you're born with it or not. It's something you can develop. It's really your attitude, your values, and that's something that can change. And when it comes to an innovation mindset, for example, failure tolerance, empathy, your attitude towards sharing and sourcing knowledge, these kind of dimensions are drivers for innovation at the individual level. And as I said, that's something you can really work on. I mean, you can work on your failure tolerance, you can work on empathy. But you also mentioned the organizational level, and that's why I want to add also different layers to that, because the individual level is one part of the picture, but also at the team level, you need the right and conducive leadership style. You need to have brave leaders who are role models, right? And then exactly what you mentioned, you need to have the right incentive and reward system, because you can't really empower and motivate people for change and then you reward something totally else, right?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
It sounds so weird, but I can tell you in a lot of organizations it's really contradictory what they tell their people to do and what they actually reward. So this all needs to be synchronized and aligned.
You're listening to the Culture Edge podcast. If you care about innovation and you want practical lessons for your career, you're in a great place with our entrepreneurially minded guests. Subscribe and be the first to know each time we release a new episode.
You mentioned before about the idea of making things a lot more tangible. What do you mean by that? So what's been your approach? Is that the solution to this challenge of transformation?
Exactly. So the first solution is when we talk about innovation mindset, to really break it down into behavior of each and every individual. Because you know what the biggest problem is, that, like, speaking from practice, that the employees, they hear about this big new company strategy and it sounds so abstract and they have no clue what it means for them in their daily life. And if you break it down to behavior that each and everyone can really apply every day, then it suddenly becomes not as big and scary anymore, right? And that's what we do. We really apply it into tiny habits. That's what we call it. And we use nudging to implement these tiny habits into daily lives. I mean, maybe you know it from sport industry. You know, you need to start with small steps when you want to become more sporty, and then make it bigger and bigger so that it becomes a routine. And that's what we do when it comes to transformation, that we take the company's strategy, derive it to tiny habits that employees can apply in their daily life, and then support them to show them how they can actually translate it into practice. And then suddenly they're not so scared anymore. It's not so scary anymore because they feel like, okay, I can do that. That's not that big. You know, it sounds quite doable.
Yeah, so rather than this big abstract statement that is delivered from above, they've actually got some concrete actions that they can take on a daily, weekly basis.
Absolutely. And you can, like, from our solution, you can think of it like the smartwatch. You know, I don't know if you're wearing one, but sometimes it vibrates and then it tells you, look, you haven't reached your step goal yet, right? Get up. And then it nudges you to walk more, right? And as soon as you have achieved your step goal, you get a reward, an incentive, and you level up. And this is how you could transfer our approach or how you can relate to our approach, because we have transferred that kind of nudging concept from the sports industry into an organizational setting.
Very nice. I mean, that sounds to me a bit like gamification in a way, that there are nudges and rewards, and well done, you've achieved your weekly goal, that sort of thing. Do you have a concrete example or two you could share? I'm really curious to learn more about these nudges and small steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to share an example of one of our clients. The name of the client is Marantec, and I'm super happy that I can share it. It's a small and medium-sized organization in Germany, and they have understood that they need to change their business model. And they are this typical hidden champion, but they're producing parts for garage doors, and they know maybe in the future there are not that many cars and there are not many garages needed, and that's why they need to change something. And so their new strategy is moving from a hidden champion to an open champion. And again, here the employees at the beginning, they were super hesitant and also resistant, because they thought, what does it mean to become an open champion? Now I should share all my IP with everyone in the world. That doesn't sound right. And there are a lot of fears involved. And then we have translated that into behavior. And now I can give you an example, which is, for example, that an employee would have lunch together with someone from another department or another location, because that's the big group and they have locations like spread all over Germany and all over the world, actually. And just having lunch with someone from another department or other locations really helps to understand better different ways of working and thinking and solving problems together, or even outside the organization, making or creating a LinkedIn account and meeting someone for digital coffee who owns your position in another organization. And I think for self-employed people who are listening to now, that's quite normal. But I can tell you, for employees who are working for an organization for 30 years, it's not so normal to connect with someone from another organization and share experiences and learnings.
No, I mean, the instinct has always been that these things are very secretive, right? That you do all of your innovation and product development in a black box, all in secret, and then one day you reveal it all to the world. So that's clearly a shift in thinking to share a lot of these things in advance. Yeah, no, that's a great example. And you mentioned about the nudges. So how concretely does that work then through your application? Is it through a smartwatch, or do you have other channels to nudge people?
Yeah, it's actually not a smartwatch. Maybe one day. For now, it's a PWA, like browser-based. So you can use it on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, wherever you have a browser, which also makes it quite easy to integrate in big corporates, right? Because we don't need to install anything. But the user can use it everywhere, and browser-based notifications will get sent then to the user and reminded to different behaviors they need to apply. So basically we start with the status quo analysis at the beginning. So based on the scientific validated questionnaire that I've developed together with my research team, the user reflects themselves on the different dimensions of the innovation mindset. So you have your own profile with your own strengths and your own grow areas. For example, you might have a strength in empathy, but you have a grow area in failure tolerance or creativity. And then you receive nudges in your daily life, how you can build your creativity, how you can build your empathy. And of course, as you said, with gamification, you get points if you do it, right? And you get rewarded. But not only within the software, but obviously it's important to implement it also in the organization, right? There's going to be, for example, some events where then the people who are in the highest level get rewarded and get a prize or a certificate. One of our clients, they actually have every week an after work event, and there's a DJ and there's a bar, and then, for each level you get into, you get an after work voucher, so you can go more to the after work event and connect to other people from other departments, right? So it's really important that it's not only happening on the platform, like in the software world, but also in real life to really experience that. So our approach is hybrid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because otherwise you risk becoming just another form of social network, don't you? If it's all just done through your browser and you're not having these physical meetings. So who would you say most needs to hear this message that you're sharing? Because I assume a lot of listeners will be thinking, yeah, well, I agree. I get all of this. I'm trying to do this, but not everyone in my organization agrees. So who would you target as the next level, the next group of people who really need to improve around this mindset?
Well, first of all, brave leaders, C-level managers in a small and medium-sized company, because they can actually really drive the change as role models. Mm-hmm. And if they are looking for a systematic and measurable approach to implement such an innovation culture in their organization, I think that's a great support. But also in big corporates, it would be like area managers or department managers who feel like, okay, I want to do something with my team and I can't wait until, the C-level is understanding that we need to support our employees in different ways. So I will do it by myself, and I would like to use some support with that. I think that could also be a good help. But obviously, I think also as a user, like as someone in a department who feels like, well, I wish we would do that, but my manager is not as open. It could also be a nice support, to show the managers that there needs to be change, because sometimes the managers are also quite resistant to change, right?
Absolutely. Yes, that's right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your message goes out to people throughout an organization, right? Not just people who work in the innovation unit or the growth department or whatever it might be. This Everyone. Really is across the core of the business.
It's good that you actually asked that again, because I think I didn't mention that, and that's something which is really important, because when you talk about innovation culture, everyone relates to the innovation department, right? Or the R&D department. But what I think, and what I've also found in research, is that it's so powerful if you empower everyone in the organization to drive that change, because the people working in different departments, they can come up with great new processes, ways of thinking, ways of working that really drives the organization forward, not only the people working directly with the product.
Absolutely, yes, that's right. And I found that myself to be a big misunderstanding then about who's responsible for driving a culture of innovation inside a company. I think there can be a certain complacency if it's okay, we've got a department who deal with all of this new transformational stuff. We'll just let them get on with it and deliver the results at the end. But absolutely not, right? It's for the whole organization to embrace that mindset.
And in the end, it's the movement, right? Of course, you need first movers, you need lighthouse projects or departments, right? You can't really get everyone on board at the same time, and you definitely should not force anyone to do so. It should be a voluntary movement, and for that, obviously, you need people who go ahead, right? And sometimes that's the innovation department, because they are the closest to the pain, actually, right?
Sure.
Or the digitalization department, because they have this big responsibility to empower the whole organization for digitalization. Maybe it's also HR, because they have this responsibility to empower their people for the future, right? And get them ready. It could be different departments, but definitely someone needs to start with it.
Yeah, someone has to take the charge. Yeah. So maybe just to address something to the entrepreneurial minds out there working in companies of all sizes, what could be one or two practical tips that you would give these entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, say? What would you recommend to them today?
I think it's really about being as concrete as possible, because I think we all sometimes fall into this trap to talk very abstract and strategically, but then in the end, everyone nods, but they don't really know what it means and what they're supposed to do tomorrow with it, right? So although sometimes it sounds very simple, I think simple is the best, to be honest. Like, as I was developing these tiny habits and development tips to feed into our platform, sometimes I felt like, oh my God, that's a little bit too simple. Like, but these tips were the ones that worked the best, and they really changed behavior rapidly. So that would be my advice for everyone.
So it's back to basics in many ways, and I like the elegant approach, right? That you keep things simple, understandable, concrete. I think I agree with you. That really is the antidote to all the wishy-washiness that can come from a lot of this strategic discourse.
100%, yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to wrap up in just a minute, Aurelia. If any of our listeners would like to get in touch with you, what would you recommend? What's the best way for people to reach you?
I think LinkedIn is a great way to reach us, also my team and I. We're also very happy to always share every week a development tip. So if you would like to learn how to apply an innovation mindset in practice without buying our solution right away, just follow us on LinkedIn and you also get some tips and practices. So that will be great. Actually, if I may also add a call to action, as a startup, you're trained to do so. We have the goal to achieve 2,000 followers at the end of the year. So if you would like to follow us, you can also win something. So that would be quite nice. And of course, if you want to get in touch with me, you can send me direct messages. Check out our website. I think everywhere on the internet you can find us.
Super. Well, we'll add a link to your website and to your LinkedIn in the description of the podcast, so everyone will have the links they need to reach out. Super. Well, I want to say a big thanks to you, Aurelia. Thanks for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure talking about this with you.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Culture Edge podcast. As you heard just now, our guests are a highly diverse group of entrepreneurs and innovators, each with fantastic experience in both the corporate world and the startup world. So subscribe to the Culture Edge podcast today and join us again for more practical advice for your career and your impact in innovation.